It is time for a good old Zerg vs Terran live game. Today I'm playing on the new Gettysburg map, one of the maps that got introduced in one of the more recent seasons, and one of the maps that actually turns out to be a little bit strange. I've had many weird games on this one, in particular versus Protoss, because it's actually viable to play things such as, for example, Carrier and Tempest and whatnot on this map, just because once it gets past like the 10-minute mark or so, this like central alleyway that goes in between the bases is very difficult to attack through. As you can imagine, obviously the forces will start building up, and generally speaking, the later you go into the game, the more of like a split map type of scenario you do see on this map. So what we're gonna try and achieve in this particular match is probably survive until Ultralisk or so. Let's give him the hi to Mr. Kyra, who's going to be my Terran opponent. But generally speaking, what is true for Terran versus Zerg is also going to be true for a Protoss versus Zerg, and therefore, usually, the later this goes, the more difficult it will be. The more difficult it will become to like attack into your opponent's bases. And the main reason for that is just simply that the map is not really designed to attack through this alleyway in the middle part of the game, and particular late game it gets very tricky. And after that, you know, after this central corridor has been blocked off, generally speaking, it's going to be quite a ways to your opponent's main bases, and usually that's going to really come into play past about 8 or so minutes into the game. But either way, it's going to be my objective here to simply just try and stay alive for as long as we possibly can. I'm gonna try and my very best here to get the Ultralisk out, potentially go for the Brute Lord as well, depending on his army composition, but stay alive for the most part. Going too aggressive versus Terran usually is, you know, if you're going up against a good Terran, that is, usually it's not that great of an option. Usually if you go too aggressive, that is simply going to be able to hold your aggression just by using basic control and, you know, controlling their army reasonably well. And usually early game pressure is just not as prevalent in Terran versus Zerg anymore. You do see it every now and then in Korea, and I've seen comments of people below the videos whenever, you know, I make these kind of regards where I'm saying like, hey, you should probably not play too aggressive. Because in Korea, you do see this happen every now and then. Where, you know, the opposing players are playing rather aggressive. But truth be told, the main reason why that's the case is because they're playing a series, right? They're not playing a single game. And on the latter, I prefer playing safe and sound. At the very least. That's my experience with how to, you know, achieve the highest win rates. Okay, so far so good. Got my 2 queens out. We do know that there's going to be Hellions on the way too. So I think I'm going to be okay here. Going to be knocking down these rocks here for the time being. And I could even go for a spine crawler as well if I really want to be safe. And you know what? I usually don't go for spine crawlers, but I've noticed that a bunch of the Korean guys have started doing that just to not really take any damage, and later on they move it over to like a more safe location. So hopefully this will allow me to drone up a little bit greedier. And ideally, I do want to make sure that I get my 3rd base up before these Hellions get to my side of the map. So gotta be a little bit careful about that. Gonna have to get it very soon, actually. There we go. These are the last 2 drones that I'm gonna be making. Next up, we're going to go for that 3rd base. And I'll also make sure that we get 2 more sets of Zerglings, because link speed will be nearly done. At which point, we do also add the drones back into the gas. So far, things are looking pretty good. So far, things are looking pretty solid. There we go. Okay, so now that my 3rd base is going up, I'm also at the same time going to go ahead and put down my Roach Warren. Roach Warren, obviously very helpful. I think I'm going to be focusing on them quite aggressively as well. Haven't really seen any movement of my opponent just yet, though. Oh, there we go. I was going to say... We do know that he's got a bunch of stuff, but he's not really doing a whole lot with it. We'll put down the spine crawler as well. I can actually block off this pathway with a single spine crawler, which is one of the reasons why I want to give it a try. Getting up the, or going up for lair right now as well. Still my goal to try and get it as greedily as possible, by the way. You know what? I'm going to move it over. I'm going to move it over. These queens are going to be able to block this pathway, and we know that he's... You know, we know that he's going to come this direction soon enough. Go for a spore in the main, because I haven't really seen all too much aggression just yet. And I'll make a couple of roaches just in case. Oh, that Hellion is going all the way around. Probably because they've realized that they can't move through the middle anymore. Actually, I wouldn't be surprised if that spine crawler is a very helpful tool. Now I think of it, I would probably recommend it to most people to use that spine crawler. Now I'm adding on a couple more. Gotta just wait for that... that scan to run at. And we'll also make sure that we get our roach speed up as soon as we can. Okay, Roaches are out. I'm getting the double evos. There we go. Got a very nice little flank on him. Sadly, didn't get too many kills. But that was a good engagement nonetheless. Keep on spreading the creep right here in the middle of the map too. Still adding on more drones, right? That's really my main goal here. I want to try and get as many workers here as possible. So there we go. And next up, right around 6 minutes or so in-game time. Seems very early, right? But right around 6 minutes in-game time is when I also want to start adding on my infestation pit so I can start teching up towards that hive that we were talking about. Very greedy, very early. And you know what? Just because we can, I'm also gonna go ahead here and add on as much of my army here as possible. Gotta be careful. Don't want to randomly take a whole lot of damage. I'm making as much army as I can right now. Okay. So there's no medevacs here, which makes this like a push that is designed to do a lot of damage. And while it may definitely do some, the more he stims, the more, you know, the weaker that army will become. And as long as I'm not taking any massive economy damage, I think I'm gonna be a-okay here. I mean, there's no medevacs here, right? He's definitely putting a lot of vacs in one basket just to try and do some work. And considering he's scanning right now to try and clean up creep, I think that's going to be an advantage on our end. Okay. Did I lose a couple of overlords by any chance? Not entirely sure. You know what? We'll just follow him home. Considering he's being super aggressive, we're just going to follow him home. Still going to tech up towards the hive here. Okay. Also got my Baneling Nest. Going to get Baneling Speed. Just because it's a very helpful upgrade. And look at that. He actually invested a ton of resources early game here just to try and get a little bit of work in. I could probably just push for the victory here, to be honest with you, but I don't really want to take the risk. Like, if you attack too aggressively, well, if I'm gonna be able to, I'm just gonna do it, right? But usually you gotta be careful about these kind of moves. You know what? I'll just boost down that. I'll just boost down that. Oh, the bunker. No. Alright, here's the thing, right? If you overextend, you can lose your army and just simply lose the game. I've already invested a lot of resources in going up towards the hive. So if I don't wait it out right now, and I'm not, you know, I'm not really taking the lead that I was going for, and I'm just sort of risking it to try and close out the game early, I may very well give up a game that I can quite easily close out a minute or two from now, right? Well, maybe a little bit more than a minute or two, but you get the idea, right? If I'm being too greedy, it may very well cost me the game still. So here we go. Getting the adrenal glands upgrade. Gonna stop making roaches altogether right now. And I'm gonna start making as much of like a Ling Bane based army that I can right now. Also having a bunch of Ultra obviously in there. And I also am getting... Well, here we go. This is the, you know, the type of aggression that's to be expected at this point. But I'm also going ahead right now and getting my Spire out. Spire in case a greater Spire, in case he all of a sudden, you know, has a bigger army than I was anticipating. Actually, we don't really need that yet. We'll wait a little bit. I need one gas over there, though. But I'm basically just waiting right now, right? We'll push one +2/+2 finishes up. We got the Ultra Cavern coming in very soon. I do still see a lot of movement on the minimap, but it looks like he's brought those medevacs home. And while I may end up losing an Overlord right there, I think I'm going to be in an advantage at that point. Okay, here we go. Moving a bunch of these guys over. And so far, this is looking really nicely. So notice as well, by the way, small little tip, I suppose. Don't group up all of your army together. There's no particular reason to have everything on one end of the map. Usually, it's best to, at the very least, have it, like, split up by default. Just in case your opponent is going to be, you know, being a pain. We'll start spreading around a couple of these dudes. I'm still adding on as much of an army here as I can. Adrenal glands will be done soon. So we'll cut in this plating, which is the Ultralisk armor upgrade. Getting the greater Spire right now too. I'm trying to spread creep onto the high ground. Okay, so it looks like he's gonna be pushing. Now this is a push that is at this point mostly a desperation move, okay? I can guarantee you that this is going to be a push where he is crossing his fingers and hope he catches me off guard, because he knows I've got a lot of stuff. He knows I've got a lot of resources, and he knows that I'm probably going to be able to hold this, but he doesn't want to give up the game just yet, right? He doesn't want to give up the game without knowing for sure. But I am definitely in a very, very powerful position here, where I'm just letting him attack. Like, notice as well, this is a small little tip, I guess, that helps out a lot of players usually too. It's like, try and not be too aggressive. Just simply sit back, wait until your opponent is coming to you. If you're having the advantage, there's no reason to get too aggressive, you know? If you have time and you can still max out, I mean, why not? Why would you not just simply wait a couple of minutes? Really solidify that advantage and just simply push. Look how small his army is, though. He's got very, very little. He's got very, very little. And you know what? I think I'm going to try and see if I can maybe set up an engagement here. I'm going to push. I'm going to go. My upgrades are done. I've got a huge amount of stuff. His tanks are not sieged up. We're getting a nice little sandwich here. Ton of units flooding across the map. Gonna reinforce this with a couple of Corruptor too, so I can grab myself a truly nice lead. But at this point... Oh, man. The Swarm is overrunning our opponent, and while he's desperately trying to expand towards another base, my opponent decides to leave the game. Alright, so here we are in the replay of the game. Now, just to be 100% transparent to you guys, I'm playing on an account that I haven't been playing on all too much as of late, and because of that reason, I'm going up against a diamond level opponent that I just found out after the game as well. Now, that's alright, It does show you a couple of the differences between a diamond level player and a Master League player like myself. Probably among the higher ranks of Master with Zerg right now, although I haven't really tried very actively to grind up the ladder as of late. But hopefully this at the very least showed you like the Zerg versus Terran mentality that generally speaking you want to be in. So what it all really comes down to is that you want to try your very best and maximize the amount of economy and tech that you're getting away with. So with economy, I mean the amount of workers that you can push out, in particular in the early stages of the game. The faster you can get to the 80 worker count or so without really losing a whole lot of them, the better it gets. And then of course, as far as tech goes, what you're really looking for is to try and get that hive as fast as you possibly can, to get the chitinous plating, to get the adrenal glands, to get the ultralists, to get the brutalers, to get all these really powerful upgrades and units in the later stages of the game. But obviously you don't want to rush it too quickly either, because then you're gonna be unsafe, right? So the real mentality you're looking for is to maximize that economy and to maximize the amount of tech that you have before really starting to pump out a ton of units. Now in this particular match, my opponent decided to go for a relatively aggressive build, right? We could notice that with the push he was doing, there weren't any medevacs. And while my opponent is in Diamond League, he obviously is fully aware of the build orders that are going to be popular. And I can tell you with very obvious knowledge that if your opponent is not getting any super early game medevacs, or not like, you know, medevacs with the push that they're going for, they are meaning business and they are trying their very best to take you out. So notice in this particular match that I wasn't really scouting all too much. Most of the scouting that I had came from this one overlord. And what it really came down to is that I'm getting, like, the units that I'm getting at a relatively blind moment. So I'm getting, like, a round of Zerglings when my spawning pool first finishes up. I'm getting a round of Zerglings when Zergling speed finishes up. When I'm adding on my third, I'm adding on the Roach Warren. And when I'm finishing up the Roach Warren, I make a bunch of Roaches. Other than that, I'm not really scouting all too heavily, but with this push right here, you could very clearly notice that my opponent was meaning to do damage, but he really didn't do a whole lot, right? He's got Stimpack done, but he did not go for any kind of follow-up with starports, and he did not have any medeffects with this fight. So after holding this, there are a couple of options, right? So in this particular instance, I decide to chase him home. Now, in many situations, I wouldn't even bother. But considering I just took a nice little advantage there, I tried my luck to see if I could win the game. Now, this is one of the main things that you're looking for, right? This is once again where that mentality that you're really looking for when you're trying to play at a higher level shines through. So there is an option here that if I would have followed this game up with massive amounts of Zerglings, that I would close out the game right here, right now. But I don't know that. I can't really tell you, right? I can't really tell you if that is going to be an option for me. In this particular instance, I don't manage to knock down the opponent's bunker right there. And I decide that since I'm going for a hive anyway, I already invested those resources to be useful in a couple of minutes from now, that I may as well just go ahead and sit back. Now you can see that both of us were slipping a bunch in macro, neither of us is playing perfect. But as far as the mentality goes, if you're going for a build that is based around, you know, higher tech units, and you're going for a build based around the higher tier upgrades, there's really no particular reason to take a risk early on into the game to try and obtain a victory, right? If you're going for a late game focused build, which is exactly what I'm doing right now, you're spending resources earlier on into the game to try and get a stronger army up later into the game, right? And that's exactly what happened here. Same thing goes for example, the push that my opponent was trying to do here, right? He still had a reasonable amount of supply. He did finally start spending pretty good as well, and his supply count actually got evened up relatively nicely. But he knows very well that he's going to be behind, economically speaking, tech-wise and everything else, and at that point, you know, Zerg is just going to be able to overrun him just because I'm spending the resources early on into the match to try and obtain the victory. Now, he says it was his first game, not entirely sure because he's got a whole lot of ladder games done this season. But either way, maybe it means the first game of the day or something like that. But either way, I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. If you haven't already, make sure you hit that like button. And if you want to see more like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well so you get a notification as soon as I upload more. But other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright? And I will see you in the next one.